And a new report into last summer's riots that followed the Southport attacks has found that the violent unrest was fuelled by social media activity. And it suggests a dedicated police force to monitor and respond quickly to social media posts at a national level.
So is it time for a national police force to investigate what's posted online? Former Chief Superintendent of the Metropolitan Police, Dal Babu, says yes, it should definitely be considered. But Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, believes it would be an authoritarian response. Good morning to you both. Dal, let's start with you in that case, because, you know, we saw here, didn't we, the role that social media played in fuelling the unrest and the riots. But, you know, action was taken, wasn't it, over that? Do you think it would be a good use of resources then to have a sort of special unit that seems to be suggested to monitor social media and to make sure that this is taken control of?
Well, it's at a national level, so it's, you know, just in terms of putting in perspective of what the report is suggesting. But the social media is like the Wild West. I'm not on social media because anything can be said. The most horrific things, the most untruthful, hurtful things can be said. There just seems to be no restrictions. And there is an absolutist approach from things like Twitter, X, where anything goes, whereas in the past, those people would have been removed. So I think what you've had is this attempt by people who believe in absolute free speech, that you shouldn't have no restrictions whatsoever. And I think that's very dangerous. And I think what we saw with the riots is that people were, well, you know, it's pretty bluntly lying, telling misinformation. I mean, we try and sweeten the pill by saying misinformation, but some people were lying. People were lying from across the world. People were lying to try and cause as much harm. And the lie was that this was the attacker was a Muslim asylum seeker who'd just arrived on a boat. You know, so that was fuel. I think the CPS was sort of very, very slow in sort of saying, look, this is not true. So I think what we saw was this whole event just explode into something that could have been managed very quickly.
So how would this special police unit operate then? In my mind's eye, I'm seeing officers sitting in front of their monitors, basically watching debates going on Twitter, on X, say, on Instagram, open-ended websites, and basically say, there's one. There's somebody who's making a direct racist threat, a racist comment, and inciting violence. We're going after them. Is that how it would work?
Well, I mean, the devil will be in the detail, but I don't think it would work like that. I think it's more around a national, because the report specifically says at national level. So we have 43 forces. They all have a slightly different approach in terms of resources they're putting into dealing with social media. I think the people will say, actually, this is curtailing free speech. We don't have absolute free speech. There are restrictions. You can't make misogynist, you can't make racist, you can't make hateful comments anyway. So this is really about having a coordinated approach. And what we saw with Southport was misinformation that wasn't challenged, which created a vacuum. And we know that Russian bots were involved. We know people from around the world were giving information which was misleading.
Sorry, to answer my question, they would basically be looking at their screens, monitoring the interplay between people who were...
Rich, I don't think it would...
At this stage, you don't know?
No, well, I mean, we don't know the details, but I think it would be, more sophisticated, because, they'll be looking at trends that are happening, not necessarily individual conversations, where people are then sort of sending information or
all right, Tom, let's bring you in at this stage then. What do you make of that? Because Dal's obviously been talking about, the Wild West, the misinformation that was allowed to flourish, and actually that there should be a sort of national, national control over this and action taken because of that.
I think before we start talking about new police forces to tackle social media, we could do with some new police forces that focus actually on policing. It strikes me that at the moment, police already spend an inordinate amount of time focused on what people are saying online. There was that Times investigation a few weeks ago that found that there are now 30 arrests a day for grossly offensive speech, for communications offences. There's been a 50% rise, more than 50% rise since the pandemic, but convictions are actually going down, which suggests that the police are already overzealously interpreting the laws that we do have around speech, the very restrictive laws that we already have on the statute book. Is creating a national capability here going to do anything other than fuel that over-policing? I think it's quite obvious what is going to happen as a consequence.
Would that point to the benefit, though, of taking it out of local police forces' hands then and having a national system that's got an overview that can look into the posts that could really be destabilising, damaging, fuelling hatred, fuelling violence?
Well, it seems to me it's only going to accelerate a trend that we've always seen to over-policing speech. I think it's a really simplistic, maybe comforting but simplistic argument that the only reason that those horrendous riots kicked off last summer was because X eased up its social media policies. We've had riots before social media. I dare say we'll have riots after social media. And what we should be really focused on is that violence should be punished by the law. It should be punished by prison. Speech should be met with argument, ridicule, your four-letter word.
Hang on,
this is how you defeat
don't there have to be limits on free speech? Clearly there do. I mean, for example, if I bought myself a megaphone and walked down my local high street this afternoon spouting horrible, vile, misogynist, racist comments, calling for violence, asking for that hotel that I know houses asylum seekers to be burned down now, I would expect to be arrested and thrown inside. Now, what's the difference between using a megaphone to do that kind of rubbish and using the internet to do it?
I think this is a really important point because incitement to violence, true threats, are not a free speech issue. That is the point in which you're leaving the realm of just opinion and speech.
Well, that's what he's talking
argumentation. About. No, he was talking there about hurtful words, the word misinformation.
No, Tom, don't put words into my mouth. No,
you did say those phrases. I think, a lot of things have been put into this.
No, I think that's not true. I think the reality of the situation is, I think Richard's point is a really good point. What is the difference between somebody shouting down the street awful things, misogynistic things, hateful things, and what's the difference between that and writing them on the email? So I think what we've now got is a system where there are some people, mainly from America, owners of these big tech companies, who believe in absolutism. They believe in total free speech with no controls whatsoever. I think that's very, very dangerous. It always has been dangerous. And there's a myth that we've got free speech. We haven't. There's restrictions. And it's if you are a person who has... You're a person who is vulnerable. I think it's important that we restrict those speeches. Because what you're going to have is people say these awful things on social media. That could then lead to action. It could lead to them attacking people. And then the police would be criticised for not intervening. So, you know, it's really, really important to see how this can escalate in the sense that it's written, and then it becomes actions.
So what is the difference, then, between the megaphone argument and the laptop argument?
I think there's no difference. If you're inciting violence, whether that's online or offline, that, of course, should be a police matter. You, of course, should be punished for that. The difficulty is when we get into the realm of, you mentioned misinformation, you mentioned hate speech, these are much more nebulous terms. And I think one thing we've really got to recognise here is that if we're primarily concerned with combating the despicable racism and hatred that we saw explode onto our streets in the wake of the Southport murders, censorship is a terrible way to do that. There's a lot of people on the kind of conspiratorial, hard-right sections of the internet who thrive on this idea that they are silenced truth-tellers whose platforms and whose followings have only expanded the more that they've been kicked off of major social media platforms. This is a hiding to nothing. If you want to confront prejudice, you have to do that out in the open. You have to defeat those arguments.
Can you have
censorship
is
a comfort blanket.
But Tom, can you have a sophisticated... Do you honestly think you can have a sophisticated discussion with these extremists? I think it's
not about them.
It's for the fairies.
It's not about them. It's about
You're
the people
never
who are
going to be
listening.
able to do that, I'm
You
afraid.
will never be able to change those people's minds. You may well be right. The point is the people who are listening to them. The last thing you want to do is burnish the genuine, disgusting agitators' narrative that they are the ones who are the victims, they are the ones who are being silenced. It's not about them. It's about the audiences out there, the people...
Somebody has to have the last word. In this case, it's fallen to you. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.